As I was introduced, my background is in both occupational therapy and education. And so what I'm bringing to you today is a bit of a conversation related to communication styles with our diverse workforce. So that diverse workforce is not only from a generational standpoint, but from the way that we all communicate. So hopefully you will take some nugget away and hopefully be able to use that in your setting essentially right away in a very fun, non-threatening way. So that's the hope. Our learning objectives are to be able to define the common characteristics of the different generations in our workforce. So just by a raise of hands, how many of you are in a workforce that have people of various ages all trying to work together? All right, so that's just about everybody in this room. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. What makes people tick and kind of what's the background of why people are the way that they are. We're going to talk about how the best ways are to manage the various generations and how do we get these people to talk to one another in a way that is both respectful to the differences that we all bring forward. And then lastly, I kind of see this in two parts. One, the generational part, but two, this brain color piece. And so I will introduce you to a free online tool that you can use with your workforce that's really very fun. There's no particular brain color that's better than another, but we're all very different. So we're going to talk about those 4 different brain colors. So let's jump in. What makes up our current workforce? Well, it's actually 5 different generations, because there are people, believe it or not, still that are the traditionalists that were born between 1928 and 1945 that are still in our workforce, particularly in healthcare. And then we have our baby boomers born between 1946 and 1964. And in some pieces of literature, these age ranges or these birth dates somewhat change. So I'm right on the edge of this baby boomer and Gen Xer generation. So between 1965 and 1980 are millennials, which are the largest group that are in the workforce currently, born between 1981 and 1996, and then our Gen Zs, totally different group of people coming up behind our millennials, born between 1997 and 2012. So why is this important? There's a lot of challenges and opportunities with the different generations that are in the workforce. First and foremost, our baby boomers or traditionalists, those are our older workers, can actually see younger employees as their children and therefore treat them in a very parental way rather than hold them accountable to the different things that are necessary. So I see some head nods. I'm wondering if maybe you're seeing these kinds of things playing out in the workplace. And then when we have our Gen Xers or Gen Ys who rise up into managerial positions and have to manage people who may be older than themselves, seeing those older people more as their grandparents. And again, not necessarily holding them accountable or treating them in ways that are somewhat perhaps patronizing or ways that are not as respectful based upon their experience levels. And so when we have managers in different levels than the workforce, then we have people that may not be held accountable to the rules and things that are within our organizations. But if we can identify that, or we can address that, or we can have conversations in staff meetings that begin to put these things on the table so that we can talk about them, we have an opportunity to really change the culture that we have within our workplace. And so that's really what we want to do. We want to identify the strengths of every group of people without being overgeneralizing, but recognizing that we all do bring to the table different strengths to the workplace. So how do we do this? First and foremost, we need to understand what our particular team needs. So just because you have a lot of people who may be in that older generation, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't understand technology. It doesn't mean that the younger people should be the ones that are teaching them technology. So really, truly understanding, taking some time to have people do self-reflections, to write goals related to what they want in their workplace. That really helps to identify your unique makeup. So there's no one really recipe that's going to fix what we're doing. And to promote a culture where people learn from each other. So maybe there really are things that our younger generation can bring to the table, new ideas, I usually use technology as my example, but new technologies that they can become the leaders and teach the rest of the team. So giving opportunities to people, no matter where they are on the organizational chart, to be able to bring to the forefront within your teams the expertise that they have or new ideas that they might have. This requires a lot of emotional intelligence. So what that means is we all feel things when things are said to us. And we may have a different emotional reaction to that. But particularly in management positions, we need to monitor that. We need to recognize that if we felt really sensitive about what somebody said to us, maybe that wasn't the intention, and then to be able to have that conversation. Or to recognize that if you have an employee that's always maybe breaking down in tears when they get feedback, that you make sure that that feedback is given in a place that protects the way that they handle their emotions. So just making sure that one understands that we as human beings have very different ways of expressing our emotion, and how do we ensure that as managers, we recognize that. And then our elements of communication. And that second half of our presentation today is going to talk about if you recognize people's different brain colors or their communication strategies, what usually works to be effective in the way that we communicate. So I want to spend a tiny bit of time here, and this just differentiates the major generations and some of the things related to the generations. And I realize that this is somewhat tiny font, so I will kind of point that out to you. But all of these slides are on the app, so you have access to this. So our baby boomers, some of the career drivers, this was the first group who actually put work ahead of family life. Very much are the people that are very loyal to the company. They are looking for pensions, 401ks, saving for retirement, but tend to be very, very dedicated, sometimes considered workaholics. Generally speaking, I heard some laughter. It's like a lot of people facing one another, perhaps recognizing that either within yourself or with people that you work with. But they're good delegators, they're good team players, but they believe that you should pay your dues. In other words, maybe have risen up from the lower ranks, and that really is the only way you should become whatever title that you get. So this is pretty prevalent in the baby boomer generation. As of 20, I believe that this column here are statistics for 2020. It was 33% of the workforce. In 2025, which is right around the corner, the baby boomers will constitute about 5% of our workforce. Our Gen Xers, considered the sandwich generation, they have most of the leadership positions currently. And they are people that are beginning to understand this work-life balance, recognizing that not only taking care of yourself is equally important to your ability to function in the corporate world. They follow the rules, they're independent, they're resourceful, they're hard workers, they're innovative, and they constitute, looking at 2025, about 20% of the workforce. So this is usually the people that are at the top of the organization. Our Gen Ys, our millennials, probably considered the most misunderstood generation. They get a lot of bad press, especially in the workforce. They're much more flexible. In fact, they take flexibility to the nth degree. They're purposeful, they have skills, they're competitive with one another, but you have to recognize that the millennials were the parents of the millennials were the ones who were constantly out there working, and took care of them, took care of everything for them. And so they really didn't have to be as resourceful as generations that had been before them. Things were pretty much handled for them. And so they prefer small groups. They like to work in pairs, not necessarily as independent as workers once were. They're very cooperative, but again, that flexibility. They're looking for things like working from home as much as they can, or differing shifts. You know, if you've got a 7 to 3, well, maybe it could be 7:30 to 3:30, or 8 to 4, or, you know, they're kind of always looking for a little bit of bending those rules. And they're going to constitute 35% of the working population as of 2025. So essentially, I mean, we got a third of the workforce that are our millennials. Now, our Gen Zs are a little bit different. So our Gen Zs are really concerned about money. They're usually really looking for the higher salary kind of positions. And I think this makes sense because the cost of their education, many of them are coming out really swamped with student loans. They're not quite as trustworthy. They've seen a lot more governmental scandals. They've been raised with a ton of attention to media. They've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. They can find anything on the internet. These are the people that are really pretty technologically savvy. But things that I have read in the literature, they're the most diverse population that has ever been out there in the workforce. By that I mean they come from interracial families. They are globally connected. They've got friends in Europe and Africa, and they don't think anything about hopping on the internet and connecting with people all over the world. And they assume that's the way the world should work. They're not as, the boundaries are not necessarily they're much more blurred because they have this connectedness that they've always had. Now, they're going to constitute 40% of our workforce. So we really need to figure out, how do we work with 75% of our workforce being the millennials and the Gen Zs? So does anyone have any, we don't have a ton of time, but does anyone have any good examples of maybe a story that illustrates a millennial or Gen Z that is really pretty profound in your workplace? Okay, well, maybe just think about that, or talk about that as, you know, you're taking some of this back. So what these next few slides are really strategies to effectively lead and manage this generation. So our veterans and traditionalists, these are the people that, you know, tried and true. These are, Jimmy Carter, Warren Buffett. We need to be valuing their experience. If they're still in the workplace, then they have deep-rooted history with our organizations. They know how all of these changes have occurred. And so the best way to handle this particular generation is really to allow them to talk about that, or to make sure that they feel that they're still valued. A lot of times when we have people who are older within our organizations, they're looking to stay within there, but maybe not in a full-time capacity, in a consultant role or part-time, or just being able to keep their hands or feet in that workforce. So, but the one thing about this particular group, there is a high amount of respect that they expect for common courtesy, pleases, thank yous, you know, holding the door. The things, they're much more formal. Baby boomers. The best way to handle our baby boomers within our organization is show them how they can be the stars, how they can be the people that really are acknowledged for the work that they've done. Baby boomers have been in the organizations for a long time. They want to be recognized. They don't want to be overshadowed by our younger generations. So this is the best way to manage, giving them developmental opportunities, giving them opportunities to maybe mentor some of the younger staff. One-on-one. And where this works well is if they're not in supervisory capacities. So when you put mentoring relationships together, it's really best practice not to have them be the supervisors. They should be somewhat peers, or if they're not peers, perhaps in different departments, so that they can develop this mutual respect, or be able to question like a critical friend, so that they can find out things about the organization without that being held in a judgmental capacity. So involving this particular group in organizational or operational matters. Our Gen Xers, this group really does well being partnered in those mentorship relationships with people that they respect or people that are in positions that they're hoping or aspiring to be in. So this really helps this particular group. Gen Xers really like that work-life balance. So making sure that even if you've got overperformers or you've got people that are doing really well as Gen Xers, they're not the first people you call when somebody else is called off. You don't want to burn this particular group out. So you really want to make sure that you are both respecting their work-life balance, because that is something that they hold typically pretty high. So, and you want to get them up to speed as quickly as possible so that they can go ahead and demonstrate the competence and performance that you're hoping for. Our millennials do best with structure. Lots of structure, knowing exactly what needs to be done, understanding that. So competency-based performance things will really help millennials. And the more you can do training and orientation with them, typically the better then that they perform. Partnering them with our baby boomers as mentors has been shown to be a really good strategy for this particular group of people. And then our Gen Zs. They're a very creative group, typically pretty technologically sophisticated. So channeling that creativity and encouraging them to communicate outside of technology, because they would rather send an email or a text than really have this conversation one-on-one. So encouraging them to become socially apt, to be able to have verbal conversations in manners that are polite and demonstrate eye contact and all of those things that they really have been sheltered from because they overuse technology. This particular group really looking for pleasant working environments. These are the people that are going to Google and Microsoft, and half of their day is to encourage creativity and play and all of this kinds of stuff. So they do well if some of the benefit package is to have access to wellness spaces, even if it's not within your workspace. So, if you can work with HR and to provide benefits that promote good, healthy living, even just water stations or flavored water or nutritious snacks in break rooms. This group does really well looking for that kind of stuff. They're very health conscious people. And as we just looked at, they're projected to make up the largest percentage of our workforce by 2025. So we need to learn how to manage this group. How else other than increasing pay? So we're kind of post-COVID, or I hear a lot less in conferences now related to COVID. And I think we're still in workforce crunches, but how do we recruit and retain staff has been a big part of the conversation in the past couple of years in conferences. Many of the things that seem to be working are to be giving time off rather than just increasing compensation. So again, that work-life balance has really kind of taken a hold with our younger generations. Wellness programs, I've talked about that a little bit, just doing what you can to promote people to be healthy, mentoring opportunities, and when at all possible, giving projects or things that a person can do remotely. Again, I'll give an opportunity if anyone has any examples of things that you have done to recruit or retain some of our younger generations within your workplaces. Or do some of these things resonate with you? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of head nods. All right. So professional communication, I think as we all know, communication is so very, very complex, but also so very important. It's really essential that we get this right for good working relationships between managers and those who are being supervised, that It's certainly been correlated with improved patient outcomes. People need to document correctly. They need to communicate to one another. When there's a handoff between shifts, all of that communication needs to happen effectively and efficiently. It increases our patient safety and certainly the satisfaction that we have, so that people want to put residents or bring the patients to our facilities. So the better we communicate and the better each layer of our workforce can communicate, the better off we all are. So this next part of the presentation is really about different communication styles. And there is a communication assessment that if we had more time, so sometimes I run this in a 2-hour workshop where I have everybody do their own self-assessment of communication style. But if you're curious about this, I'd like you to write this down or access these slides after. What color is your brain is based on a social worker's work. Her name is Sheila Glaskov, and I've had multiple conversations with her and have shared with her that I have used this in college settings. I've used this with workforce. It's a really simplistic communication assessment, but it's pretty on target. Essentially, it's a brief assessment. There's no right or wrong answers, and you take these words and you put them in the order that you believe you are in several different categories. And the outcome provides you your dominant brain color. There is a free online quiz, and you can see here there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but there's a workplace brain color quiz, there's a healthcare professional brain color quiz, there's one that's related to sales or professionals, so there's really one that's personal, a romantic one. Essentially, it all comes down to the same kind of assessment, but they're quick and easy, online, free, click the button, answer a few questions, and you'll have your brain color. It essentially gives you these words, and you have to rate those words based on how you are, not how you want to be, and then you tally up the columns. If you do it online, it does it for you. But what you find out is which is your dominant color. So whichever of these adds up to the highest number is what your dominant brain color is. And so there are 4 distinct brain colors, and I'm going to read through these, and you'll probably be able to kind of put yourself in one of these or a blending of perhaps 2 of those. So people that have a dominant yellow brain color are typically found to be very responsible, very organized. They get stressed out when things are disorganized. And this constitutes about 30 to 40% of people. So it's a pretty dominant brain color. And these people, when they communicate, they're very direct in the way that they communicate. So they're giving out a lot of kind of factual information. If you have a blue brain dominance, you're pretty communicative and you're helpful. You tend to overextend yourself. You are the person that says yes, and then you go home and wonder, why in the world did I just take on one more thing to do? They're inspirational people. They're the cheerleaders behind others. And again, this is a pretty dominant color. It's 30 to 40% of our population. Now we have a green brain dominance, and I don't really like to stereotype, but this particular group, they're pretty logical, they're independent, they're stressed out when there's not adequate information or not adequate resources to do their job. They value efficiency, and they're about 10 to 15% of the population, and these are the people that I tend to think are more in the engineering fields. You know, they're very logical, very systematic, green brain dominance. And our orange-brained people are the very dynamic, fun-loving, the event planners within the group. They don't like monotony. In fact, change doesn't bother them. In fact, that's the thing that really makes them tick. And again, not quite as frequently do we find orange brain dominant people, but when we do, you definitely know who they are. They tell information in stories. They kind of are very linguistic people. And they're, again, they're the cheerleaders. They're the people that are planning the parties, that the solution to a bad assessment is, well, we'll get over it and, we'll have donuts tomorrow and things will be fine, But again, there's a lot of scientific background behind these 4 different brain colors. Now, the really clever thing about this is once you understand yourself, that's the first step in this. But when you start to identify what other people's brain colors are, then you can adjust your communication in such a way that it truly gives them the information that they need. So if you're yellow brain dominant, typically you see other people that are yellow brained similar to yourself. They're dependable, they're effective, they're practical, they're dedicated, they're organized. But you see people that are blue brained maybe as a bit emotional or indecisive. Now, none of those brain colors, I think you would agree, are really better or worse than others. They're just different. And so recognizing how you communicate will mean that you will see other people in a very different light. If you are yellow-brained, you might see green-brained people as a bit more abstract or perfectionistic or feeling superior or acting or communicating in a way that is condescending. And that may or may not be certainly their intention, but it's the way that you are perceiving that based upon the way that you communicate or the way you see the world. If you're blue brain dominant, you're going to see other people that are blue brain dominant as creative, as emotional, as helpful, as trusting, as flexible. Generally, you see them in a positive light. You may see people that are yellow brained being very rigid or domineering. So again, this really taints the way that you see the world versus the way that you are. You may find that green-brained people are inflexible, uncommunicative, because they're really just looking for the numbers, the data, and you are communicating in a very different way. If you're green brain dominant, you may find people that are orange brained as very impulsive, spontaneous, unreliable, illogical, because they don't follow that same orderly way in the way that you communicate. And again, if you're orange-brained, you may find that green-brained people are condescending, dull, insensitive, dry, where you might find that the people that are like yourself are problem solvers or influential. So again, if you look at some of this information and you do it with a team, it really can bring about conversations as to how other people are seeing the same information that's being delivered. So I really encourage you to do this with a team, particularly a team that might be open to having that conversation. We always did this with groups of students or teams that were newly promoted and helped them identify not only their own communication style, but how to communicate with other people. So the ideal conditions in a workplace obviously are, once you determine the way that you can communicate and how your other people communicate, that we can do the differing communications respectfully to the other people who are looking for things that are different. And certainly remembering that people thrive when the ideal conditions exist that make their strengths come to the forefront, to when they are able to be seen as what they bring to the table actually has some helpful parts to leading the organization forward. So if you can identify different colored brains, these are really good strategies to communicate specifically to this particular group. If you've identified people that are yellow-brained, the best way to communicate with them is to be very polite, to be punctual. They are the people who like the rules, and so respecting those boundaries, if you will. Respect their personal values of organization. Stay on track with the communication. These are not the people that you can go off on tangents. What's happening inside of their mind during that time is, I've got other things to do, I've got better things to do. So just, be somewhat mindful of that. Give them the details. They like to know all of that information, and encourage them to talk about the things that they have contributed to the solutions. Allow them to talk about the achievements that they have. If you are communicating to people that are blue-brained, this is our verbal group. You want to be actively listening. You really want to hear what it is that they have to say. Respect their emotions. This is a group that really has a lot of emotions when they are listening to things or telling these stories. Stories will work best to explain your point of view. So if you have case examples or something that can illustrate that, this is really helpful when speaking to a person that tends to think or see or communicate in this more blue-brained manner. Connect with them personally. They like to feel valued. Ask them about their family. Ask them about things that are going on outside of work. They really need that or need to feel that emotional connection with the people that are managing them. If you've got green-brained workers, these are not the people you want to add a lot of small talk to. Give them the facts, give them the percentages, give them the numbers. That's how they think. This is your independent workers. Give them the resources that they need and oftentimes deadlines, and you will have the work that is necessary. Be brief and informative. Give them lots of data and statistics, and then encourage them to talk about the solutions that they believe can be made for the problems. And so that's generally how you get the best work for people that are dominant in this manner. Orange-brained people, the best way to deal with them is to be direct, to have conversations and communication in a manner that is exactly what they need to hear. Respect their spontaneity. So this is your party group. Make your point quickly with this group, and give them the results. What is it that you want to see? What's the long-term outcome that you're hoping to achieve? Because they're going to be creative in the way that they go about getting that. And this is a group that likes to talk about their personal lives, their hobbies, their creativity kinds of things. Now, how do you retain or keep particular dominant ways of communicating encouraged or motivated? Yellow-brained people, you want to have a positive attitude. They really like to hear that inspirational kinds of stuff. But what works really well for them is scheduling time off to recharge. So giving them, some blocked time. I've heard some organizations that actually, if you've got 2 weeks vacation or 3 weeks vacation, people can't take it 1 or 2 days at a time. They have to take an entire week. And sometimes people balk at that, but that's a really good way to kind of force that recharging, make policies and procedures related to that. Blue-brained people, give them tasks that they enjoy doing to the degree to which you're able to do that. Developing friendships with other team members, so this is a good group to cross across different departments. Tapping into their creativity really works to keep them motivated into the work that they're doing. Green-brained people really like extra education. So education, continuing education courses, books about particular things really make them feel like you're valuing. They're your continual learning kind of people. Even giving them projects where during work time they can do some of the research and do the work there really makes them feel motivated and productive. Orange-brained people, if there's something new they can do every day, a really good strategy for them. Time for creating fun and exercise, really good things to help keep them motivated. And those social activities. So if you plan events where you want to increase the morale, you want to put your orange-brained people in charge of those kinds of things. So Just some other tangible things. Yellow-brained people do really well with just verbal praise, being acknowledged with the achievements that they've done, either publicly or privately. Again, that could depend on the individual person. They expect the best from the team that they work on. They're really looking for excellence, so that ways for you to let them know that they have achieved that, really good ways of demonstrating that appropriate praise. Green-brained people do well with reasonable goals, so they may stretch and really want to achieve things that are far beyond, so reining them back a little and making sure that they have set reasonable goals with reasonable time frames so that you can keep them motivated and feeling well. They like education, fair feedback, really works well with them. Blue-brain people like those little tchotchkes, good job gifts, those things that they can put on their desk that show that they've been recognized, so more kind of informal things. Inspirational stories that maybe weave in the work that they have done or people that they have interacted with. And then orange-brain people, they like the big celebrations. So the big team, they might do well with every month birthday parties, so they can organize those things. So just to kind of wrap up, obviously we all communicate very differently. We have different generations in the workplace. People are tuned in very differently. But the more that we bring these things up and we can have conversations so that our teams can realize the different things that we bring to the table, the better off our teams will work. So I invite any of you, if you have particular questions or you have examples, we have a few minutes that we can share that for the good of all. Please.
Do we have any suggestions with cultural diversity and communication? In our area, we have a lot of folks from the East. So is there any suggestions or websites that we could source out that help us with cultural communication?
So I think a lot of times when we have people from differing cultures who've entered in is sharing opportunities for them to tell stories about themselves, to bring in something that maybe the other people in the workplace haven't experienced before. Bringing in a recipe of something that they enjoy that's food-wise. So particularly if they're new to the organization, so just celebrating the differences, but not only highlighting them, but allowing, people that are of other, Italian, whatever, to bring that in so that it becomes culturally a bit more normal. But to that question, does anyone else have any other suggestions if you've got a pocket of diversity? Uh-huh. 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 Uh-huh.
We're going to go do a cruise ship early, and we're doing different ports, but each port will give us a different port of choice that will allow them to influence their culture into the day. So it's been a fun way to get the associates to be involved with the residents actively, and also give some pride in where they came from.
Absolutely. It's a great celebratory way of doing that. And integrating not only the staff, but your residents at the same time. You don't have to delineate that. So we've had, not necessarily along that same lines, but there was a facility that put up baby pictures of their staff, and the residents had to identify who the baby pictures were. And then they did it with the residents, and the staff had to identify, who the residents were. So just, for all, doing some fun ways for that. Thank you for that question. Other questions or things that your facilities are doing to celebrate the diversity of different aged workers, different communication styles? Okay, it's been a long day. Thank you all so much for your time and attention.